The year is 1710. The place is Amsterdam. You are going to visit your children. You knock on the door of a grand canal-side home on the Bloemgracht, house number 15. A young woman answers. You tell her you are here to visit her father's anatomical museum. She welcomes you inside and shows you into a room unlike any other on Earth. Its shelves are filled with glass jars which hold perfectly preserved human body parts, vibrantly colored by injected wax. Here you find your children. Conjoined twins who had been stillborn at 8 months, but in their jar still look as if they were born yesterday. Perhaps you think such a thing could only be possible through dark arts. You would not be the first. Soon you leave this place which has become your children's tomb, the anatomical cabinet of Dr. Frederick Kraus. Kraus's cabinet was a technological marvel of its time. He was the first to perfect a technique for the long-term preservation of soft tissues and spirits, and he used this technique to transform human body parts into visually arresting scientific objects, which could be closely examined, compared, and reused. My talk today concerns the specific type of object comprising 1/3 of Raus's 2,000 object collection, human fetuses collected through Raus's work with the Amsterdam city midwives. These, I argue, brought together experiences of pregnancy loss, obstetrical practice, and early embryological research. Tracing the braided histories within these preparations offers insight into the complex human histories behind scientific objects. The woman visiting the bodies of her conjoined twins at Raus's museum was not a hypothetical. Her name was Wooneman, and she gave Raus the body of her twins under the agreement that she could come and visit them whenever she pleased. Raus's account of the case suggests he had been called to Wooneman's delivery due to the easily imaginable complications caused by having conjoined twins. The network for obstetrical care in Holland during this period was highly unique, and it institutionalized cooperation between midwives and male obstetricians. This ran counter to most of Europe in this period, where male practitioners regulated midwives out of the medical mainstream. But in Holland, each neighborhood was the territory of a licensed city midwife, who delivered the women in her zone as an autonomous practitioner and was required to call in the male obstetrician only in cases of complicated deliveries. And in Amsterdam, this obstetrician was Frederick Kraus. Regarding his work with the midwives, Kraus wrote, "I am gratified that I was often called to miscarriages, when I found the parents sad, for they were of the opinion that they had created monsters. I am in the habit of consoling them and assuring them that perfect infants change after death in the mother's womb." To these parents, Kraus could offer a unique method of memorialization, his specialized technique of embalming, which would, Kraus promised, restore a fetal body to perfection. The number of fetuses in Raus's collection testified to the attraction of this option. Historian Rita Knuth claims Kraus was offering parents a secular relic to memorialize their lost pregnancy. Of course, Kraus got something from this arrangement too. He was also responsible for training aspiring midwives, and for them, these fetal preparations were an unparalleled resource. In addition to demonstrating fetal age, the frequency of maternal death allowed Kraus to make preparations showing the fetus in utero. He preserved fetuses whose bodies spoke to issue midwives often encountered, presentation abnormalities, wrapped or knotted umbilical cords, and injuries from forceps. The preservative liquid in jars were for storage. The bodies were taken out, actively handled, examined, and redissected. Raus's preparations made stable empirical objects out of a fleeting, unobservable bodily phenomenon. More than just a new visual technique, these preparations offered a novel, robust method for learning about the body and how to care for it. The immense utility of Raus's preparation technique was not overlooked. In the early 18th century, many anatomists tried to emulate Raus's technique, but none could truly replicate the quality, detail, or aesthetics of his results. In the 17 teens, Raus began to court buyers for the collection. Various princes and scientific societies expressed interest, but Raus's entire collection was sold for 400,000 modern-day dollars in 1717 to the Russian Tsar Peter the Great. The two men knew one another well. Peter had learned anatomy through private lessons with Raus in 1697, and Raus wrote that Peter's anatomical skills surpassed those of many physicians. Peter was particularly fascinated by the preserved fetuses. While Raus had used these preparations to teach practical obstetrics to Amsterdam city midwives, Peter's interests were embryological. The mysterious process of gestation was one of the period's most nagging scientific questions, a debate especially fraught because no embryological process could be directly observed except for in chicken eggs. Peter's purchase of Raus's collection made St. Petersburg the home to a vast and entirely singular embryological collection. Peter made Ruysch's Anatomical cabinet the core collection of the new Russian Academy of Sciences, and he tasked Academy physicians with collecting more fetuses, particularly abnormal ones, along with information about the pregnancies which had produced them. Peter aimed to dispel superstitious beliefs about pregnancy through display. His museum, the Kunstkammer, was public, and he believed that seeing real, prepared fetal material would enlighten his subjects to Western science. Yet this collection ultimately set the standard for European embryology. In the 1720s, several visitors to the collection recall seeing the fetuses arranged to visually depict gestational stages. This is a visual strategy that would only become the scientific standard 80 years later, once quality spirit preparations sufficiently proliferated from Holland throughout Europe. Ruysch's collection ties together three distinct groups: parents, for whom preparations were personal and emotional relics; midwives, for whom preparations were a way to both learn about gestation and provide hands-on visualizations of complications a midwife might encounter during delivery; and scientific physicians, for whom fetal preparations offered new empirical research material to the study of embryological processes. Ruysch understood the value of his collection to be in its flexibility, its various modalities of use. The door of his museum was open to Wuneman visiting her children, to the curious public, to midwives in training, and to elite gentlemen looking to learn anatomy like Peter the Great. So what does this story tell us? I offer up three things. First, that focusing on objects provides an inside view of how scientific knowledge is made. Ruysch's collection is not just a story about a new visual technique. Later in the 18th century, this collection, in the hands of the Russian Academy of Sciences, was proffered as material evidence for a new theory of developmental embryology, the scientific model which persists today. For that story, unfortunately, you'll have to read my dissertation. But today, I've shown how a new visual technology opened up new methods of research into persistent scientific questions. Second, through this collection, we can materially connect a history of early scientific embryology with the historical experience of pregnancy. For all that Ruysch's collection transformed the visual and empirical landscape of embryology, its existence at all is owed to Ruysch's close relationship with Amsterdam's midwives and his bedside manner with parents after a lost pregnancy. Developments in embryological theories relied upon midwives and grieving parents. A focus on anatomical preparations materializes this often obscured network. And third, this story reminds us that objects are multivalent. Nothing has a single story. A fetus prepared within a glass jar, kept within a museum, is at once a lost pregnancy, an innovative visual technology, and an object of scientific evidence. These narratives are inextricably bound together. Thank you very much for your time.